I guess, a critical part of our deliberation today, which is the adoption of the consultation document for the long-term plan. And if I can have Ross, I was going to have Matthew, Tanya and Kylie. Are they? Okay. You do it.
Ross and Kylie.
Yeah, Ross.
Okay.
And Shark. So different from my run sheet, but welcome nevertheless.
Okay, thank you. So I won't go into detail on the report and all of the documentation that sits underneath it, but perhaps just talk a bit about the process we've been through and the process from here, and a little bit around the procedure for adopting these documents today. So the process is the Mayor's already mentioned. Decisions were made by the governing body in December about what items you wanted to consult on. So from there, staff have gone away and drafted the full set of documentation, being the consultation document and all of the supporting information, which is this big pack of information here. It's so that has been workshopped with the governing body. It's also been through an extensive internal review process. We've had our legal team, our risk team, our internal audit team look particularly at the asset management parts. So we've had our financial control team look at the financial statements, etc. So it's been through extensive reviews. It's also been through the whole audit process, so it's had the external review as well. Following on, at the conclusion of those internal reviews, we took a report through to the Audit and Risk Committee earlier this month, shared with them the draft documentation. They've considered all of those review processes and the documentation, and they've passed by way of resolution advice to the governing body that they've basically given you assurance that there are effective internal controls and effective risk management processes around the long-term plan development process, and that there are no significant outstanding audit issues in the view of the Audit and Risk Committee. So they've given you that assurance, and that helps support the audit, the finalisation of the audit process, and the audit opinion you'll hear about later today. So that's the process we've been through. The report covers that background and the process we've been through. It also covers the next steps from here after you adopt these materials. It talks about the consultation process. So we've talked to you about that several times before in workshops. We won't go into that, but we can answer any questions around the consultation process from here if there are any questions. In terms of the proceedings today, there is a statutory requirement to go through in a certain order. We've already started that by taking those other two items first. The first item here is to adopt the supporting information for the long-term plan. So that is this pack of information that supports just the long-term plan or 10-year budget part of the CD. After that, there will be, you'll hear from the representatives of the Office of the Auditor General. And then after that, we'll be asking you to adopt the consultation document itself. Then there is the delegation. There's the Auckland Plan component of the CD you'll be asked to adopt, the standard delegation, and there's a few things to note at the end. So I guess the first thing we want to focus on is is item A, which is the supporting information, and up on the screen there it does note that this does include the CCO accountability policy that is part of the supporting information that you've been asked to adopt here. So yeah, happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Ross. I'll move it and ask Councillor Clow, as Chair of the Finance Committee, to second it. And just note we've made a small change to the first recommendation so that we're including the draft CCO accountability policy as part of this adoption. Now, if we can deal first of all with clause A of the recommendations only, because once we need to move that in order to hear from the Office of Auditor General of their opinion on our document. So if we can constrain the questions first and then discussion simply to clause A. Councillor Casey, I think I see.
I'm very clear from previous questions asked that the public who don't have a computer can go to the library and see this document and this document, which is the supporting information. But actually we don't see that in this page, and I've just checked with staff and it's okay to make this amendment, but if councillors could look at the bottom of page 50 of the consultation document, what needs to be stated is that the full plans and summaries of the plans and the supporting information will be available at libraries, service centres and local board offices. Because all it says here are summaries of the plans will be available. So if you could add that in to read that the paper copies will be there, I'd be very happy.
Yes, we will do that. That was absolutely the intent. I'm glad that you're clear, and I apologise, the documentation isn't as clear, and it will be fixed.
Yep. You do have that. You can read the full documents. That's
And
online. So it needs to refer to the libraries as well. Quite right. Thank you, Councillor Casey. Councillor Newman.
Thank you. This week, Auckland Transport emailed to advise that the formal consultation on the draft Regional Land Transport Plan will take place in late April, that the date hasn't been confirmed, and that the original intention was to consult alongside the long-term plan. However, the consultation has been, quote, decoupled, end quote, and moved into April to ensure it's informed by and strongly aligned with the government's soon-to-be released policy statement on transport and refreshed ATAP. So I'm just wondering if you have a comment on that, because it seems to me a pretty substantial part of the debate is actually going to be shared off from the process around the 10-year plan for which we're consulting.
Yes, I guess we're comfortable that it will all come together through the long-term plan process in its entirety through to June, when you adopt the final plan. I guess in the consultation document, we talk about, or we make explicit reference to the ATAP process, the report that will come out in March, and then later consultation in terms of which projects will be funded by the regional fuel tax to happen at a later date. So the intention is to align as much as possible consultation on the regional fuel tax, the projects to be funded by the regional fuel tax, alongside the regional land transport plan consultation on projects. And I guess the way we see it fitting together is that what the long-term plan consultation is asking, the question it's asking, is to Auckland support in principle the idea of introducing a regional fuel tax to progress transport outcomes. And the material in here sort of paints a high-level picture of the type of things it might include. Is very sort of clear on the uncertainty, but talks about it could fund additional public transport investment, additional walking and cycling investment. Talks about rapid transit and all those things. It makes it clear that the specific projects will depend on those discussions with the government. But we don't think that that's any barrier to having the conversation now about the in-principle question of, do Aucklanders want to continue with the status quo funding levels, or support a regional fuel tax to do more and make more progress?
The issue with the regional fuel tax debate is it's a debate around a hypothecated tax for the purpose of delivering new infrastructure. Part of the issue around the existing funding question is around the renewal of infrastructure, the operating costs associated with that, which is not funded through the fuel tax. So the fuel tax conversation, which is separate from this, actually doesn't respond to the question about how we maintain existing assets. So that is something that I think needs to be part of central to the conversation right now, but because of the decoupling, it seems to me it's going to be shared off, and what you have said doesn't give me comfort. So I'm wondering, is there a way to reconcile that, or do we just have to go with this decoupled process and just hope for the best, understanding that the community, when it is able to consult on the 10-year plan, won't actually be able to address that question because the documentation which they will be able to talk about won't be released at that time, it'll come later?
I think the answer to that question is that we can't consult on what hasn't yet been agreed, and it hasn't yet been agreed because of the timing of the election and the change of policy. We are anticipating that by late March we will have had the discussions on the Auckland Transport Alignment Project, and we're anticipating there will be a separate, probably 2-week period, if I recall rightly, period of consultation on ATAP and the Regional Land Transport Plan, so that people won't be denied the opportunity to have some input into that decision. In this part of the process, however, whatever is in the ATAP or the Regional Land Transport Program, if we haven't got the funds to fund it, it won't be there, which is why we have to have the regional fuel tax proposal here, because there is a clear indication from government that it intends to legislate that, and a clear intention by this governing body that we want to consult on that as a form of funding our part of the obligation towards those costs. So we can't do what we can't do. The Audit Office wouldn't accept for us to speculate on what might be in those documents. We've simply got to wait for that process to take place, and then there'll be further consultation on that basis.
Make some comments
Is
later.
that helpful?
No, I'll reserve for comment.
Yep, sure. Okay, Councillor Fletcher.
No, mine was actually a point of clarification earlier on, and I think you've resolved that for me. But whilst I'm happy to support most of the material today, I still have a reservation about the consultation process. So I was just seeking your assurance that we can take these separately, but by taking A separately to begin with, presumably you're just going to work your way through.
Yep, no, that's exactly right. Thank you. Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just two questions, regional focus. One is about the regional fuel tax. I just want to confirm that it's still in the document, because I haven't had a look today, in this point document around the use of diesel and petrol on blocks of land that may be farming or lifestyle type, where machinery is being run or vehicles are being used for farming and not on the roads. Could you just confirm what our stance there is, please?
Yes, so the intention of the regional fuel tax has always been to apply only to land transport usage and not apply to diesel that's used for other purposes. I guess the details of how that scheme works, how a rebate scheme might work, is still to be, I guess, fleshed out in detail. But the intention was not to tax, not to cover diesel used for non-transport purposes.
Yep.
So it's just diesel that's excluded, not petrol isn't part of that?
No, I think the way that it will work, and I know Councillor Cashmore might want to comment on this, is pretty much the way it has in the past. Non-road usage of petrol and diesel are excluded currently and would continue to be excluded. But
correct.
Councillor Cashmore, you've got experience on this as a farmer.
Yes, so it's very much status quo, but it would be system we rolled forward into this fuel tax proposal. What we have got to clarify yet with the Crown is actually the mechanism that is done, whether it's done directly through the fuel supply companies or it's done from the end user back.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. That did clarify that. And the second question was really asked by Councillor Newman. I thank you for asking that question, Councillor, because it did raise a concern with me as well around this decoupling process and how it was going to come together. So thank you for giving that explanation. So that question has been asked, Mr Mayor, and I've listened to that answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Right, we'll move now to comment on Clause A. If there's any comment required, we may have exhausted that.
Probably just a comment, Your Worship. Yes, so we've moved from questions to comment?
Yes, yeah,
Your
exactly.
Worship, thank you. I won't be voting in favour of A. Just listening to the answers that have just come through now, I don't have enough level of confidence because there are so many variables, Your Worship, and obviously you're seeing that too in terms of your negotiations with the Crown. I think it's highly unusual to go out and ask ratepayers to comment on taking money from them and them not knowing specifically how that money is going to be spent. I find that highly unusual, and I just don't feel it's proper for me to vote through on A, Your Worship, when the ratepayers don't know where that money is going to be spent. In other words, we seem to be taking the money without people knowing on specific projects which be spent on, and as a conscious vote, I'll have to vote against that, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Newman.
Yeah, Your Worship, I guess, look, I'm happy to, I'm not happy, but I understand we have to go through a consultative process, however difficult it may be given a decoupled consultation because of factors beyond our control in the transport space. But what I would say, Your Worship, is that given the hypothecated nature of the proposal for the fuel tax and the requirement beyond that to continue to fund the renewal of transport infrastructure, which is severely constrained and a lot of those assets are sweating, is that my expectation is that we will, before we consider the 10-year plan, get better information from Auckland Transport as to how it would continue to fund the renewals program absent the interim transport levy, because my understanding is that we're talking about a switch in revenue from the transport levy to the fuel tax, and the fuel tax is hypothecated. So I will be keenly interested to know how the renewals part will be funded, because that will be essential to giving confidence to the community and will be significant, certainly in determining my vote on the budget at a later date.
Thank you. No further, I'll just make it, Councillor Cashmore.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So when we look at the transport aspect of this 10-year budget, this long-term plan, we do not have control over the Crown's positioning. They are wanting to do their GPS and revise ATAP to their directives, and that process is underway now. We are going out to consult with the public, and every person out there understands the transport shortages we have in all modes, the deficiencies. So people have to decide whether they want to fund extra to make things happen quicker, and by the time we start making the decisions in June, late May and June, for the adoption of this LTP, we will have an alignment with the government through the ATAP process, which will give the answers to your questions, Councillor Sayers, and also to Mr Newman's concerns about the non-connectivity of the two proposals. They will come together. At the moment we're going out to consult. We can't put a list of projects because we don't know. We can't put the list of renewals equally because we don't know what the CapEx budget is. Once those things get lined up, a lot more certainty will be delivered around the final decision making in May and in June this year.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. That's very helpful. Councillor Hulse.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And as we 90% of the time always are, the Deputy Mayor and I are on exactly the same page on this one. I'm just a bit incredulous, I think, with what Councillor Sayers said. This is normal LTP process. We're going out in good faith, in the spirit of absolute transparency and democracy, to go to our community and say, you have told us really clearly your number one priority is to sort out transport in Auckland. And Councillor Sayers, you have been the loudest voice around this table about finding a greater budget to seal roads in Rodney. This is your one thing. It's the one thing I've heard you say. It's the one clear thing I've heard you say. More money for sealing roads in Rodney. So what we're looking at here is saying we can either have status quo or we can actually raise the money that every Aucklander is asking for through a regional fuel tax of 10 cents. What do you think? We can give you a list of things, and it's really well set out in here of what we can do, and then exactly as the Deputy Mayor says, that is finally decided and worked through with the government, who hopefully will help fund a large amount of this. This is no different from any other LTP. It's no different from any other discussions that we have with our ratepayers. In a 10-year time frame, an awful lot changes. We can be as clear as we can, and then we need to say we will work this through for the right decision at the right time. We will never go out with a 10-year plan with everything, every I dotted and T crossed, because if we'd set a plan 10 years ago, it would be hopelessly out of date now. It would be the, you know, the 2-lane bridge over the harbour. It would be the no one ever gets on trains. And God help us, there'd never be a cycleway around because no one 10 years ago rode a bike. So, you know, I have to say, Councillor Sayers, I think it's, and Councillor Sayers obviously is not interested in what I have to say, so I'll say it to the rest of us. I think it is a slightly specious argument to say that you can't vote on something unless you have every I dotted and T crossed. I think it behoves us to go out honestly to our community and say, we're asking you about a regional fuel tax, tell us what you think.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hulse. I want to speak in reply. I don't want to cut anybody else out from the debate. Councillor Stewart?
I can sort of understand where Councillor Sayers is coming from. One of the things that I'm a little bit concerned about, and I know a number of us have spoken about, and that's the waste charges, the targeted rate for the food scraps collection funded for the targeted rate. There's no actual figure there. We have been told it's $67, and I think that really needs to be, if we can, that for me to support this going out, that figure needs to be put there, because I think people have to know what they're up for.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher.
I only want to speak briefly on this, but to say that whilst in principle I support Councillor Sayers' desire for accountability and specificity on the projects, the reality is that we are a creature of statute and we are working within the time frames that are required of us. So I have a lot of sympathy, but I think on balance we just have to recognise that we have this impediment. We are really driven by a statutory timetable. So at this stage I'll be supporting A.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fletcher. That's absolutely correct, of course. And Councillor Hills.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I just want to obviously support this. It's going up for consultation. We want people to give us a lot of feedback. The issue for me is we know the gap in funding is there. The original ATAP agreement had a $4 billion funding gap with the government and us, and then Simon Bridges, who was the minister at the time, announced in August that it was $5.9 billion gap that's unfunded, and I'm sure it's growing, and we know that the projects will slightly change with the new government, but I know that we're all on the same course and we are very clear that there's a funding gap, and that's just basically the bare minimum of what needs to be spent. So we have to raise this money somehow, and the only time to ask people about that is now. Yeah. So I think it's important that, you know, everything else in the document, not just this, is there, but I think the number one thing people ask for is, can you just get stuff done? And we need to raise money one way or another to do that. That's transport, that's water, that's Cody dieback, that's everything that's in this document. So I think it's just important that we get on with it. The only way to get on with it is to get it out to consultation. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hills. In reply, nobody else? There's only one thing unusual about this, Councillor Sayers, is that we had an election right in the midst of our process for the LTP, and we can't control that. That's a fact of life. And with an election comes a new government with new priorities, and we need to sensibly work through their priorities as against our priorities and have a joined-up approach. There wouldn't be a councillor around this table that would be opposed to the principle of the Auckland Transport Alignment Project. Many of you have sat around this table when governments come out with something here, council there, they haven't met in the middle and there's been a stalemate. We know we've got to make progress on transport. And the only way we can make progress on transport is with a joined-up policy where we expect the government to meet their fair share of the costs, and because they're meeting their fair share of the costs, they have some say in the outcome, and that's logical. And we've got to look at that negotiating process as has been entrenched in the ATAP process, which brings out an effective program for addressing the concerns that Aucklanders have. For any of you that think that we can deal with a situation with 800 extra cars a week and 1.6 billion extra kilometres a year being travelled now compared to 4 years ago without more funds, please tell me how you do it, because I don't know how to do it. We do need more funding, or this town simply grinds to a halt. We've seen it in the congestion question. They've warned us that what we're doing now, even with the 27 billion in expenditure previously designated OPEX and CAPEX under the transport alignment policy, things will continue to get worse. If we rely on the interim transport levy, that gives us 60 million. It isn't enough. While we expect central government to play its part, it collects the tax revenue overall, we've got to pull our weight in this as well. If you think people in Invercargill and Wanganui and Kaikoura and Takaka are going to say, we'll meet all of Auckland's needs for transport, think again. They're not going to. They're going to expect us to pull our weight, and the government expects us to pull our weight. And there are two options set out in here. We could, of course, not proceed down the road of the regional fuel tax, but we're told in these documents by officers that that would mean an extra 8 to 9% on our rates. Well, that's an option. I don't think it's an option that our constituents want. They want a system that says if people like me, excuse me, using the roads all the time, we should be paying more than, say, the retired folk, Councillor Newman and your electorate, or your electorate, Councillor Sayers, that don't use the roads all the time, that say, why am I paying the same amount as a big corporate when they've got a fleet of cars on the road and we're not using the roads at all? So we want a more equitable system, and we want a system that brings in more finance. And that's what the regional fuel tax is about. Yes, we haven't determined what specific projects are part of that mix. We know it will broadly go into the pot, and it will be used for a variety of projects. But if we don't have that, we won't be able to meet any new capital works apart from what we've already approved, and we'll barely be able to meet the renewals program, Councillor Newman, that needs to be met and absorbs a lot of the money anyway. So this phase of the consultation really is going out to our constituents to say to them, we've got this huge challenge. We're growing by 50,000 people a year. We need to invest more in infrastructure. This is one more equitable way of doing it than what we've done in the past that returns us 2 to 3 times as much money as we've done in the past. Is it the only answer? No. Is it the final answer? No. But it's a necessary part of the answer. So, look, I sympathise with councillors. I've got the same dilemma. I'd dearly love to know what the ATAP program looked like, and to be able to go out to the first meeting next week and say, this is what it funds specifically. You know, we can't do that because we don't have that information. It's not reasonable to expect that we've got that information yet, but we will have that information, and that will be a later part of the consultation process. So I think it's really important, if we want this council to meet its responsibilities to our community, to give it the means to do so, and that's what the long-term plan is about. This resolution is simply about adopting the supporting information for it. So I'm not quite sure why anybody would vote against this resolution. It's not about even the substantive point we've just been debating. It's about adopting this document and saying this should go out for consultation. Of course it should. Is there any reason why we shouldn't put this out for consultation? Why would you vote against an amendment that simply says we're going to make this information available to us, available to our constituents? So I rest my case on that, councillors. I want now to put the recommendation A. I'll do so.
By division?
By division. It's been requested to be by division. So I'll call on officers to take a roll call.
I'm voting for this. Greg, I'm voting for this.
Councillors, you're voting on the recommendation as you see it on the screen. It's item 12, clause A. Mayor Goff.
In favour.
Councillor Casey.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Cashmore.
Aye.
Councillor Clow.
It's a tough one. I think I have to go yes.
Councillor Collins.
For.
Councillor Cooper.
For.
Councillor Darby.
For.
Councillor Fletcher.
Yes.
Councillor Hills.
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Holtz.
Aye.
Councillor Lee.
Aye.
Councillor Newman.
For.
Councillor Quacks.
For.
Councillor Sayers.
No.
Councillor Simpson.
For.
Councillor Stewart.
Because it's in the for.
Councillor Sir John Walker.
For.
Councillor Wayne Walker.
Yes.
Councillor Watson.
Yes. It was close.
Just a consultation.
18 to 1. Have we gone either way?
So the resolution is passed by 18 votes to 1. At this stage, councillors, I'm about to receive a letter of representation to me from the Chief Executive to give me confidence that all of the information that is involved in the consultation document is credible and reliable. I have received that and I need now to pass to the Office of the Auditor General my own letter of representation to say that the information in this document is correct and reliable. So I can ask, sorry, that one there, make sure I've got everything there. If I can ask Sandra to deliver that to the office, to the officer, Joe Smales, the Audit Director, and if I can invite you, Joe, to the table, please. That means you can meet halfway to get the letter. And the purpose of this session, which is at the heart of what we're doing today, is to receive from the Office of Auditor General their opinion on whether the consultation material that we are planning to put before the public is reliable. So, Joe, welcome to our committee today.
Morning.
Very good to have you here.
Thank
and our sympathy for the Deputy Auditor General that's probably in transit at the moment.
Hopefully he's landed, but I'm not sure. So thank you very much, and thank you for the letter of representation, and I have got a signed opinion here that I will hand over. So we've effectively finished our audit, and we believe that the consultation document is fit for purpose. So we're issuing what's called an unmodified opinion, but we have included within the opinion what we call an emphasis of matter. So it's effectively a paragraph that highlights for the reader the uncertainties that you've been talking about this morning around the transport package and around the funding. It isn't a modification, it is purely saying, here, readers, we're highlighting this for you, and you need to have a look at this within the consultation document. We believe that the council have made every effort to be as clear as they can be. The timing in terms of the new government, ATAP, the government policy statement, the fuel tax legislation has all worked against the council in terms of having certainty around what packages are going to be consulted on in terms of sitting under public transport or roading or whatever. So it has been a very difficult process to work through, but we're comfortable that we have been or the council has been as clear as they can be. There is also an underlying assumption in the information, the big block of information that you've got sitting there, that also explains some of the additional information. So we're comfortable there, and I will be handing over an unmodified opinion. But I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Joe. So everybody understands, I think, what an unmodified opinion is. That's an opinion in support of the documents that we're planning to put out as being, in the opinion of the Audit Office, a clear and reliable account, with the acknowledgement that we've been discussing in the previous debate that we can't put out in front of people decisions that have not yet been taken. So I think now is the opportunity for anyone here to ask any questions of Joe Smales. You might have terrified everybody, Joe. I think the points you've made are very clear about it, but I do just want to pause to make sure that I guess not everybody's had the chance to look at the opinion. Those of us on audit and risk, such as Councillor Sayers and myself and others, have heard the opinion, and I'm delighted. And I actually, what I want to do while you're thinking about any questions is to give a special thanks to our finance and legal and other teams that have put the work into creating these documents. There is just a huge amount of effort that has gone into that. And one thing that impressed me right at the start of my time as a member of this council is the quality of the work that we get from our officers. And that is also, I think, commented on favourably by the Office of Auditor General. So to Matthew and team, Stephen, to your wider team, thank you very much for that. Councillor Hulse.
Mr. Mayor, thank you, and I completely commend your sentiments. I also want to acknowledge the Audit Office for signing off on our mini consultation document that we're able to send out there. I thought that was really, really good work, and again, good collaboration between all parties involved at the last minute to get that sorted. And I'm hoping that we may be able to explain, this is a fairly arcane thing, it excites us and we understand why this is such an important piece of paper. It'd be great if we could explain it in real people's language out there to the real world, because we do get a lot of criticism that our processes are opaque and that somehow we haven't shared the details and there are aspersions cast on what we do by one Penny Bright. I think it would be really good if we could find a way of explaining quite clearly that these unqualified decisions are not given lightly, and that this is indeed a stamp of approval for not only our processes but the transparency by which these decisions are reached. So I hope, Mr. Mayor, you get a chance to do some media about this in and of itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Penny. Please signal if you want to intervene at any point, Joe. Otherwise, I'll just take comments and questions. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, I'm very pleased that obviously it's ticked all the boxes and it draws attention to the transport issue we have. I suppose my question is around what takes us from adequate, the words like adequate and fairly represents to a higher level, or are these are just sorry, I'm not a pro in these kind of words, but is there some is there some way we could do a better job? Is there ever a conversation that's had on how we can, or are these just what they say? This is just the terminology used when we've done as good as we can.
Yeah, this is standard wording in an audit opinion of this type. So we haven't actually done, it's not the same type of audit that we do for an annual report.
No,
this comes under a different standard. So the wording is very much in line with the type of wording we would use for similar engagements of this type. So this is good. It's unmodified, as the Mayor said. This is a good result, and the wording is as good as you can
This is as good as it gets.
Sorry.
Your Worship, the reason I qualify that is I suppose when, a lot of people read annual reports and there is a different terminology. So I suppose that's the reason for my question. I just wanted to make sure that it was as good as it could get, even though the words weren't probably as glowing as they could have been.
Councillor Simpson would have been devastated at school simply to have had her performance marked as adequate.
Exactly.
But I think Joe has indicated that, in her words, that this is as good as it gets. The Audit Office is not known for using extravagant language.
No.
Point made. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comment or question? Joe, is there anything that you want to add?
Just saying, when we do the audit for the long-term plan, which we do after you've been through your consultation process, we're expecting that you will have had ATAP and you will have had some decisions and some agreement with the government about what's going to happen going forward. So we would expect to see a lot more certainty coming through in the long-term plan than we have got in the consultation document, and we'd expect to see that much more firmed up, I guess, within the document and within the budgets, etc. So we will I guess if we got this level of information in the long-term plan, it might be a different type of conversation. But we are anticipating that by the time we get to June, that this will all be locked down and some really good decisions will be made. And you'll have a lot more certainty about where you're going and what your funding is going to be going forward.
Yep.
That's absolutely reasonable, and as we speak, our officials from both local government and central government are working hard to get this ATAP document prepared in time for next month, and there will be consultation on that. Well, thank you very much, Joe, and thank you very much for the effort and for your appearance too before the Audit and Risk Committee. That was much appreciated. You've now had the chance to read the opinion, and you can see that the opinion of the audit officers that these documents are an effective basis for public participation in our decisions. They fairly represent the matters proposed for inclusion. They identify and explain the main issues and choices facing the council, and the information and assumptions underlying the information are reasonable. So, yeah, it might be described as adequate. Actually, it's an A pass, Councillor Simpson.
That's all I'm after. Thank you. A's fine, thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. Can I, now that we've received a copy of the opinion, and that will be incorporated into the consultation material, we can now move to voting on the remaining clauses. So clause B relates to adopting the consultation document for the long-term plan. I don't know whether we probably need to go to another session of questions and comments. If you've got something pressing to say about it, please indicate to me. Otherwise, I'll just put the questions. So, Councillor Clow.
Yes, I don't want to say very much other than I'm hoping we get very strong feedback on the two targeted rates, because it's been unfortunate that nature has delivered us the challenges associated with the natural environment targeted rate and the water quality targeted rate. Of course, we don't want what has happened here weather-wise, and we certainly don't want what has happened regards Kara dieback, but they have been delivered to us over the last few years and with increasing severity. So and I know not everyone around this table agrees that we're doing the right approach, but I sincerely hope that there's a lot of publicity and a lot of strong feedback about both those targeted rates, because we need to be doing something about it, and there's no question people can see where, if they do agree and support us in bringing about those targeted rates, they know explicitly where that money's going, and to try and solve and work on and improve the issues associated with water quality and especially Kara dieback, but other pest and weed management. So I just want to make those comments.
Thank you very much, Councillor Clow. I entirely endorse those comments. Any further? Councillor Simpson?
Question. If someone was looking for the funding re the art gallery, where would they find that? Has that been
I'm going to ask our officers to come back to the table, because there may be questions here. I don't know specifically what part of the document it's in. Ross, can you...
RFA.
Under RFA.
Under RFA, thank you.
But there'll be no specific reference to the 2 million. That's just something that we will consider at the time.
So that's my point, Your Worship.
Yep.
It's something that has come out recently, and it isn't specifically mentioned. So, therefore, how do people make a comment? Is it just an other, or?
I guess the short answer is that they make the comment because they've seen the announcement that I've made, and that so many councillors around this table have endorsed. And that comment, of course, was made only after ascertaining that the finances would be available out of the budget to be able to deliver on that.
Because it was an addition, I was just asking.
Yeah. No, it's a fair question. Is there any other comment?
I would just add that there is, in the supporting information, there is very high-level information about RFA and about those types of activities. So there's kind of some financial information doesn't go anywhere near that level of detail, about 2 million.
Well, it's come later, that's why. So
it will come later. But people can make a comment about anything that they would like to of relevance to long-term plan. There's no restrictions to stop people doing that.
They'll probably comment on things that we haven't even raised, undoubtedly. Councillor Darby and Councillor Casey.
So my understanding, and as does Councillor Simpson and I are keenly interested in this, it is not in the draft budget. So we did not make a decision to include.
No.
It is for our consideration when we get feedback. So Councillor Simpson makes a very good point to clarify this, that despite the Mayor's announcement, which supports the approaches that some of us have made, there is no additional budget in the draft budget. We are reliant on getting feedback and also considering that matter at a later date. That is it.
So how do we tell Auckland?
There is no extra money at this stage. Got to get there.
Just say under question 7.
Do you want to comment on?
I guess I just, the only comment I'd make is that applies to a whole range of things. There's a lot of detail across the budget, the budget that isn't resolved yet and will be resolved as part of the budget in the final.
It does, but I'm just, there's a lot of people out there that think it is now in the draft budget. It's not. There's a job to be done by all of us.
Yep. And I think in terms of the Have Your Say meetings that all of us will be attending, we'll be speaking to that point, and I don't doubt that there'll be questions around it, and equally I'm certain that there'll be submissions on it, because I've talked to literally dozens of people who intend to make submissions on it. So the point that I made in the announcement was that this was simply a proposal that I was making in terms of the long-term plan, but that I had the support of a significant number of councillors around the table, which I think is a fair description of the discussions that Councillor, you and I have had, and I've had with many other councillors around the table. Okay, any further questions or comments on clause? Oh, sorry, Councillor Casey, I had recognised.
It just struck me that that's a really good question in terms of an index. People do have single issues they want to look up, for example, whether we're going to look at paying the living wage to contractors after the 3 years that we say we're going to take to pay them to our staff. And back to the paper copies, there isn't such an index here. So if you're online, is there a word search?
Understand that it is all searchable online.
So if you're not online and you've got your paper copy, you just have to weave through it, or?
Well, there's the CD itself is a short document, and the supporting information, there is a table of contents up front.
High, at the beginning. But there's no index.
No, there is no index.
So if you were, say, looking up dogs, art gallery, or living wage, you'd be stuck.
You just have to read it.
Borrow your friend's cell phone.
And clearly, in terms of our feedback document, we couldn't put all the issues on it, so we chose the critical issues. But I think it is a point, and I think councillors and local board members can help facilitate that discussion process by raising it at meetings. I mean, it is an area that I'd like to get feedback on. I've got quite a lot on social media, some of it positive, depending on whether people believe that we should have a culture at all, and some of it not. Okay, any other comment or discussion? Otherwise, I'll move to recommendation B, which is adopting parts 1, 2, 4 and 5 of the attachment C as the consultation document for the long-term plan. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 The contrary, no.
No.
Carried. We move to recommendation C, which relates to the Auckland plan. If there's any question or comment about that, Jacques is hovering. If not, I'll put recommendation C, which is adopt parts 1, 3, 4 and 5 of attachment C as a summary of information contained in the draft Auckland plan 2050. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 The contrary, no.
Aye.
Carried. D is the normal clause of delegating responsibility, in this case to myself and the Chair of Finance and Performance and the CFO to approve any final edits. I'll put that recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no. Carried. And E and F, with your indulgence, I'll take together. It simply notes the features of the consultation process.
Mr. Chair,
Councillor Fletcher.
as I alluded to earlier, I want to try and be constructive in supporting the document today, but I still have severe reservations, not with the material that's going out, but with the consultation process. And I know that that's shared by a number of other colleagues around the table, and I would very much like for us to just be able to have an opportunity to express that, and for those sections of E to be taken separately. So.
Oh, okay, I'm happy to do that.
Around the process.
I'm presuming that most councillors have got the chart that I've got, which gives you the opportunity to go to 60 or 70 different occasions. The Deputy Mayor has assured me that he'll go to every one that he's able to.
Oh, sure. There you go. That's good.
I qualified that appropriately. But look, maybe I could just take this opportunity and since it's been raised by Councillor Fletcher, to say it is really important, not so that we're there doing all the talking, but that we're there as often as possible doing a lot of listening. So could I please urge councillors, I know, look, I've looked at mine and maybe I can make a dozen of them. Others I've just got doubled up appointments, but to do your very best to get out and hear that feedback at first hand. Councillor Simpson.
Your Worship, I share Councillor Fletcher's concerns, and I just want to tell you why. I suppose, we went out to local boards and said, when is the best time to consult? Where would you like to have your say? The one compulsory sort of have your say, and the other sessions. And they've chosen times to suit themselves in their areas. Some are based on events that are currently happening there, and many, if you look at the documentation associated with this report, many of them are at other events, and there's a tent or something you could just come in, or there's a drop-in session for 2 hours. The reality is we've probably got up to even 100 things potentially we need to have feedback from. The big ones, of course, are the targeted rate and the fuel tax, but the change to our waste service, the Te Puna Mongat Authority, the Auckland Plan, whether we get rid of, some people are interested and some are not, and dogs, living wage, whatever. Is the first question we say to people, what are you interested in? I mean, they want to know what we're consulting on. And I suppose, I've supported the summary document only because you can't, have a list of whatever. But I think the point that Councillor Casey makes, to have an index or a list of the key main things, is really important, because I think what will happen is we know that a lot of people don't necessarily turn up to these things. They'll get this, so you'll get the majority of feedback on those key issues. But on the other things, and some of them are pretty meaty, pretty big, they'll get lost because people don't even know that they're there on the list to even be asked their opinion on. And I suppose I am worried that in a drop-in session, how do you tell people, well, we're asking you about it would take 10 minutes to ripple through all the things we're even asking to comment on. So the process, look, I can't see how we can change it. From my personal perspective, I am looking to have other consultation sessions in my ward on regional issues, because the local boards, their main focus was what local board thinks. They want to talk about their OLI, the main local board project, and they want to talk about the other things that they want to achieve in their 10 years. But they're not regional councillors. The regional things that we're consulting on are huge as well. And we have to share the main Have Your Say event with the local boards, looking after all their local projects, and then trying to get our stuff. And the period of time is literally, I think, in the 2 hours max. So I do have a concern about the process, and I don't know that, I'm hoping that Auckland, my request probably is to the media, to help, really, because there's almost something every day that the media could cover, and we should too. Our comms and engagement around the consultation, is it targeted to cover particular, I've decided on social media I'm going to cover an issue a day for the month, because there is an issue a day for the month, without even touching on my local board stuff. They have their own local board Facebook page, but are we doing a comms and engagement plan that every day takes a point out to the public on what's being asked and why, and are we doing that? Because I think that's the supplementary to the process that actually we haven't got coverage on in what's in front of us today.
Thank you, Councillor. Look, we did have quite a long session when we workshopped this with our people. I'm not saying that I disagree with the comments that you're making or Councillor Fletcher's making. What you've indicated in your own answer is that we also have the potential, each of us individually, for outreach using social media. I know some of you will be working really hard on that. Organising, if we choose, our own meetings within, in your cases, your wards. The attachment B, which sets out all of the, the meetings that we've got planned there. I think there's it 35 have your say and etc. 26 have your say and 35 community feedback events. We've got the specific events for Pacifica, for Maori, for Mana Whenua, for the advisory panels. We are doing the professional survey so that we're getting a cross-section of opinion and not just those that are more activists. I suppose when I consider this to a central government budget process where on budget night you'll learn what's in the budget and then it will be legislated even without going to a select committee, we do pretty well at a local level. But can we do better? I'm more than happy to hear any suggestions on that, even at this point. But we've pretty much, in the work we've already done, set out the timetable of what we're going to be involved in. And I know personally it'll be hard for me to do as many as I'd like to here, but I certainly have the opportunity to get out and talk to a much wider group. And I'll be doing as you're doing, talking about it on social media, talking about it in the media, and going out to events where I can get that feedback. Okay?
So,
Councillor Fletcher.
Your Worship, without relitigating everything that, and this has been an ongoing gripe, and I know that we are, in terms of outreach, we are making significant efforts to engage, the widest possible response from Aucklanders, and I appreciate that. I am not diminishing that, but in so doing, there has been, I think, some diminishing of the formal processes that have given dignity to civic life in the past. And I don't want to labour this today, but I believe that it has been an error of judgment that we have given so little time to the formal processes in favour of a much wider have you say. So in registering my protest against that, I just want to put it in that context and say that I think it's something we do need at some stage to revisit, and when I do choose to try and do so when we go out for the next annual plan or whatever it might be, I hope that other members of the governing body can indulge me the opportunity to speak further to this.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm listening to your point. Can I just point out, maybe finally in response, we have got the 4 regional stakeholder events, which are very traditional, and I think we invited, officers could correct me if I'm wrong, I think we invited every councillor to add names to that regional stakeholder event if they wanted to have those names added. So we have tried to pick up some of the traditional stuff as well as some ways of reaching out and getting to communities that perhaps haven't been as engaged as we would like them to. Okay, if there's no other questions, I'll put E and F separately then. E is the features of the consultation process, which we're simply being asked to note. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no.
Against.
carried. And F is delegating to ourselves, to the local boards and to staff the responsibility to hear the public through this process. So I'll put that resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no. Carried. And that brings to an end our session today, which we got through pretty quickly and efficiently. Thank you very much for your cooperation with that. And a reminder that we're meeting again tomorrow, just in case you really missed